Hey, this is Anne Hancock Toomey, and we're going to do something a little different this week on the Backstory podcast. We're over halfway through the series, and we've talked to 13 incredible leaders. So we wanted to take a minute just to reflect on one of the questions that I ask in every podcast, and that is, what are the 3 characteristics of the most effective leaders? Here's what Chris Roth at St. Luke's Health System had to say.
Not necessarily any order, a really good listener, somebody who asks good questions, somebody who values humanity and is a good person. So you can list all the values and things like that, but just was a servant leader. I'm a big believer in servant leadership. I don't read a lot of leadership books, but I do love anything around servant leadership and the attributes of leadership. Listening, curiosity, and a good person.
The truth is that the question is only important because of the people who are answering it. This is a carefully curated group of leaders. Every one of them, while their stories are clearly unique, they have certain things in common. They are successful because of who they are and how they lead. And so my hope in asking this question, which always comes near the end of our conversations, is to get at those ingredients to their secret sauce. I'm not asking what makes you successful. I'm intentionally asking what makes effective leaders successful. But to a person, they end up describing how they've learned to lead, what works for them to motivate and inspire others. These are seasoned leaders, 20, 30, 40 years into their careers. And I think how they, and frankly, how we all lead is a combination of who we are at our core, how our experiences have shaped us, and how other leaders have inspired us. Here's a take from Sherry Shapiro, Chief Strategy Officer for Common Spirit Health.
I think the 3 characteristics that I both noticed and I try very hard to incorporate in my leadership style are ability to be vulnerable, effective communication, often and transparent communication, and then third, I would just say caring or empathy.
And here's what Phil Rowe, Senior Advisor at Martin Ventures, had to say.
People who value relationships, respect the person that they're working with. As a person and as a business professional, people who have the ability to communicate an idea or a concept or a goal and convince others that is a good idea or a good concept without forcing it, but to do it in a way to allow them to see the vision, buy into the vision, get behind the vision is probably another one. And then building that kind of culture where people learn to trust each other and work with each other. Any leadership team where there's competing efforts for one to be different or better than another is ultimately going to take away from the value of the relationship, which then takes away from the value of the organization, the value of the culture, and has a negative impact. So people who can do that in a way that does not allow that to happen, I think is a wonderful quality.
So maybe unsurprisingly, there are common themes that have stood out, and some that rose to the top. I'll name 4 because they were repeated over and over again. The most effective leaders are good communicators. That's not just their ability to put into words and the ability to engage and to convey ideas, but it's also about listening, like really actively listening and then being able to communicate well. Here's a take from Joanne Anderson, former CEO of UNC Health Southeastern.
Leaders who are honest, who are real, and who are great communicators. People are not going to follow you if they don't trust you. And if you say you're going to do something, you need to do it. Being real, again, is you have to make yourself vulnerable. They have to see you as a real person.
Yes.
If they don't see you as a real person, you just become a figurehead. And again, people are not going to follow just a figurehead.
Yeah.
And communication is the key to both of those. Communication, not just one-way communication, but communication in all aspects. Listening. Listening is extremely important. People knowing that you hear them and that you care about what they're saying.
Thing 2 would be authenticity, self-awareness, being real, being human, being genuine, being willing to be vulnerable. admit mistakes. That was the second one that kind of rose to the top. And then the third, compassion. Leading with compassion, valuing everyone as humans, giving people the benefit of the doubt. Here's Rhonda Brandon, CHRO of Duke University Health System.
I start with being authentic. Part of being authentic is to be self-aware. It is so critical that we as leaders are self-aware. Who am I in front of you, Anne? I want you to hear, see, and feel that this is the real me. And then that way I can relate to the real you. Compassion, caring about others' stories. Everybody's got one. And when I'm walking these hallways, or I may speak to a peer and they grunt, right? And it's like some people would say, you got an attitude today. To me, I say, you know what? I don't know what you've been through today.
That's right.
So I'm just going to extend you grace and human kindness. And I would say, certainly, bar none, having integrity. Being a man, being a woman of your word, following through when you say you're going to do something, being transparent in a way that's helpful. I think those are the primary characteristics of a leader. Oh, and cannot forget, you got to be inspirational. How are the people going to follow you if you're boring? You got to inspire. You got to have that drum beat. I love to brighten my team's day. My refrain of the word that I use after most every meeting with my team is onward. Onward. Let's go. We can do this.
This is Mike Wiekert, president of Team Health.
I think it starts with competency or capability. And maybe that's a given, but sometimes people look past that as a starting point of the conversation. So you have to be knowledgeable and good at what you do as like the starting point. And then for me, probably a sense of genuineness or authenticity as a leader. It's not been a hard thing for me personally, but I've been around people who I might describe as inauthentic. And I personally, I could never get past whatever else they brought to the table. I could never get past that. And then probably the third thing, and I think it's true in all vocations or industries, but it has to be especially true in healthcare, kind of this sense of compassion.
Yes.
Can never forget why we show up and what we do every day and the work we do, and we stand behind the people who are actually doing the work that matters, stuff like that. So I think competency, authenticity, and compassion.
A close fourth would be integrity. People who lead with integrity, who are honest, who are trustworthy. Without trust, what do you really have? These are folks who are always following through. But we also heard multiple mentions of humble, confident, curious, transparent, and the ability to elevate the human spirit, to inspire. This is what Tim Johnson, COO of Presbyterian Healthcare Services, had to say.
I think humble stands out immediately because it's not about us. It really isn't. And I think the sooner you learn that, the better in your career. It's our jobs to coalesce and bring everybody along, send the message, create the vision, whatever it might be, but it's not you, right? It's us. Healthcare is a team sport. Secondly, I would add probably transparency, because I don't know if this is unique to healthcare, but there's just, some people are just suspicious by nature. And if you're not, again, communicating, over communicating, and really just telling your teams and whoever else in your organization everything you can possibly tell them at the time. Sometimes you can't tell them quite everything, right? But being as absolutely transparent as you can be.
One thing that I thought was funny was that Ken Grayboys and Shlomit Shaw both hated the question, which was just interesting. I think I need to introduce them to one another. They both rejected the insinuation that there is one best way to lead, right? Leadership is more complex than that. And as Ken says, we're all leaders.
I think the number one thing is to really not like that question. Because if one thinks that they've got the answer of what it means to be a leader, it means that they actually think of themselves as a leader in a way that has form and structure and substance associated with the construct of being a leader. And I think leadership is something that emerges in a moment, in a time, in a context, from a variety of things. And we're all leaders. There's no one who on their gravestone is going to say, I was a great follower. It's not. We're a world of leaders leading lives and journeys, the narrative for autobiographies of from our origin story to what we did with it. And if my role in the workplace is to be a purveyor of an environment in which folks can find and bring their best selves to what we're collectively trying to do, that's what I try to do.
I agree. But there's something to unpacking styles of leadership and what combination of traits is most effective in motivating others and getting results. Funnily enough, after much protest, both of them rattled off 3 powerful traits pretty easily. Here's Dr. Shlomit Shaw from Houston Methodist.
This question always brings me hives. What are the 3 characteristics? And the reason is that there are many good leaders, excellent leaders, but it doesn't mean that they have to have 3 things, exactly 3 things, or it doesn't mean that all the great leaders have one quality. It's more complex than that. And what I have learned, and this is true for me, but I don't think it's true for every great leader. And the first and top thing that I value is really integrity and trustworthiness. When I look up to leaders, and many leaders in my life, I look up to people that I can believe that what they say is what they mean and what they can do. Another thing, to your question, what makes good leaders, really the ability to communicate. So people can have great vision, people can be brilliant, but if you are a leader, you need to be able to communicate the vision in a very simple way, simplified way, so people understand and they can follow you. And if I had to pick a third, see how I'm complying to your rules? The last one, I think, and this is from being a swimmer, an open water swimmer, is really the consistency of a leader. When I swim, I know that I'm swimming from this shore to that shore, and that's my direction.
Bill Southwick, former CEO of Qualdron Partners, said that great leadership is more about high EQ than high IQ, which I think is right.
The ones that we've all seen, to me, exude an inner confidence that probably isn't always there, but it shows to be an inner confidence. And I think it's what I've learned over the years. I think an effective leader has a higher EQ than an IQ. The humility, the dealing with things in a authentic, genuine fashion, transparency, just no hidden agendas. Everybody's trying to reach the same goal. If you can establish where you want to go and how you're going to do it and the way you act to get there, it's not that hard, in my view, to be a good leader. It's the challenges along the way that make you want to say, should I deviate from that? Really, no. Do you have to pivot from time to time and make different decisions? Yeah, but ultimately, the ones that I admire the most show an inner calm. They show a matter of fact, this is what we have to do, and there's going to be extreme highs, extreme lows. Ignore both and move on with what you need to do.
You know, David Gerard offered a similar sentiment. He talked about that great leaders are both humble and confident, but the best leaders understand that in the give and take of a day or of a year, sometimes you need to be more of this and then sometimes more of that. The worst leaders are those who are tone deaf.
That sense of humility, I think, is important, but it has to be balanced with a bit of confidence, a little bit of strength, a little bit of spine. And it's understanding in the give and take of a day of a leader or the year of a leader. Sometimes you need to be more this and sometimes more that. Sometimes you're more humble and you're disappearing off the stage as others step forward, and you're proud of that because you have that humility and confidence. But other times you got to take center stage. The other actors are counting on you because they're in that moment when they need it. You're so in tune with yourself and the environment, the landscape that you're in and the people that you're around, that it's like that you need to be who you are in the moment.
So there was something that Vaughn Tonquinlivan shared that challenged me. She said, you have to be willing to give up who you are to become the person you could be.
I think about Betty Steiger, who touched me early in my career and my life. One of the great advice she gave to me was, you need to be willing to give up who you are to become the person who you could be. And that was such interesting advice. Like, I had to really think about, what did she mean by that? And how I began to interpret was, I had carried a lot of my own baggage about what we all have expectations of our parents, for example, or communities of who we should be, right? Yep. And to be able to shed some of that so that we can go be our best and highest self is really important. So I actually had to forgive myself and say, it's okay for me not to be great in these other domains, because where my best and highest use is really in unlocking opportunities for others and doing big systems work.
Often you hear the opposite of that, right? That you should stay true to who you are, even as circumstances and opportunities change. That is authenticity, right? But I think that we often don't know who we are or what we're capable of or what our heart really wants until sometimes later in life. Sometimes we're trying to fit a mold, or we're trying to be who others think we should be, which is limiting and is obviously the opposite of authenticity. So I think Vaughn is right. It takes courage to take risk and to take a sort of a counterintuitive path in our careers and in our lives, but often that is where we discover our true authentic selves. I've learned so much from these 13 people about what they value in a leader, what it takes to be an effective leader, and what they've offered has largely validated the premise of the podcast. The best leaders don't have to be Ivy League educated or have 14 advanced degrees. The best leaders are unabashedly human. They are imperfect risk takers who care about the people that they work with and for, and they have a passion for making a difference in the world. None of the leaders that I've interviewed were handed leadership or a C-suite title, right? Many of them came from humble beginnings and had no clue where life would take them. But every one of them is a lifelong learner. They are hungry and have always been hungry to use their talents for good and eager to learn from others. And that, I think, is what has made them successful and effective and truly inspiring to me and countless others. Here's Pete November, CEO of Ochsner Health.
I think you got to create an environment where people feel safe to make mistakes, to talk about whatever's on their mind. You can't be a good leader if people are scared to tell you the truth, tell you the things that aren't going well. If you are a leader and you're creating that, it's dangerous. The other one is just being authentic and being yourself. Because if you try to be someone you're not, people are really smart and they'll see through you really quickly. And that includes being authentic about the things, your flaws, and we're all humans and we all have flaws.
And that's a wrap, at least from the first 13 conversations. We'll be back with our next episode in a couple of weeks. Wendy Horton, CEO of University of Virginia Medical Center.